Everyone says, just gonna let it go. Just gonna let it go. Oh, I did not know what's. Oh, we haven't been doing this one. Duh. It's really want to try to test sound alerts when I first come in. I should, have them on open screen. I don't know why I keep throwing. I don't think they're going to give me anything. Now for no things.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Oh, that voice now.
Is this not why you are here?
You must never give in to despair. Allow yourself to slip down that road and you surrender to your lowest instincts.
Nice. So, Oh, cool. Those are working. Yeah, what's the Twitter feed on here? Oh, sad. Wonder if Sound Alert isn't listed as a mod. I'll have to figure that out someday. Okay, I'll tweet this. Okay. So Sound Alerts are working, Blurb is working. Sound Alerts are mostly working. So now to... There's so many other people on right now. How Critical Role is going. Where am I? Yeah, a lot of people are not live right now. What's Wolf gonna do? I mean, I could go ahead and wait to have some cubs come in. I do have the tell that came through before it started streaming like it usually does. Okay, what's tonight's question? What hardships have you overcome recently? Can't believe I had a whole pizza when I was hungry, so it's not. the heck was that? Okay. Oh, sorry, kitten. Did not see your fluff down there. Turn off my fan. Okay. Guess I could check to make sure the audio is actually going out, not just what I'm hearing. Give me a second for that. Okay, all monitors off. Well, at least it looks like it's catching my voice, so I guess that's a good thing. Try one more source. More output anyway. Oh, Pokemon's going. Good to know. Okay, and audio check for my tablet. All right. All right, everything's working. The wonders will never cease. Let's see. What was the last one I did? Last one I did was Carrie's Stave Skirt, wasn't it? Yep. And of course, my notepad's missing. So. Right. Well, with nary ado, come over here. And I'm going to mute the sound alerts. So. Check something else real quick. Hold on. Sounds like we've got fireplace audio. Do I have my audio? Looks like I've got my audio. Cool. Alright, well. Cubs. If you're there. So get into the reading. And I will try to pay attention for when people come in. Because I'll be looking at a book. Yes, you know, that's how you read. So this is from Norwegian folklore of Asbjørnsen and Mo. The first story is The Fox as Shepherd. There once was a woman who set out to hire a shepherd. Then she met a bear. "Where are you going?" said the bear. "I'm off to hire a shepherd," replied the woman. "Why don't you hire me as your shepherd?" asked the bear. "Yes, I will, if you're good at calling," said the woman. "Hi-ya," said the bear. "No, I don't want you," said the woman when she heard that, and she went on her way. After she'd walked for a while, she met a wolf. "Where are you going?" said the wolf. "I'm off to hire a shepherd," replied the woman. "Will you hire me as your shepherd?" asked the wolf. "Yes, I will, if you're good at calling," said the woman. "Oof, oof," said the wolf. "No, I don't want you," said the woman. After she'd walked a little while further, she met a fox. "Where are you going?" said the fox. "I'm off to hire a shepherd," said the woman. "Why don't you hire me as your shepherd?" asked the fox. "Yes, I will, if you're good at calling," said the woman. "Doodle-halloo," said the fox, nice and sweet. "Oh yes, I will hire you as my shepherd," said the woman, and she put the fox in charge of tending her livestock. On his first day as shepherd, the fox ate all the woman's goats. On his second day, he put an end to all her sheep. On the third day, he ate up all her cows. When he came home in the evening, the woman asked him what he'd done with her livestock. "The skulls are in the river, the bodies are in the grave," said the fox. The woman was in the middle of churning, but she thought she'd better go and see to her animals. While she was gone, the fox slipped inside the churn and ate up all the cream. When the woman came back and saw what he'd done, she was furious. She picked up that little bit of cream that was left and threw it after the fox so it splashed on the end of his tail. And that's why the fox has a white tip on his tail. And now you know. Makes sense, right? Cool. Foxes. Okay, the next story is the blacksmith they didn't dare let into hell. During those days when our Lord and St. Peter wandered the earth, they came upon a blacksmith who made a pact with the devil. The man had agreed that he would belong to the devil in 7 years if, until that time, he could be the master of all masters in the art of blacksmithing. Both he and the devil had signed the pact, and that's why the blacksmith had put a sign above his smithy doors that said, "Here lives the master of all masters." When our Lord saw this, he went inside. "Who are you?" he said to the blacksmith. "Read what it says above the door," replied the blacksmith. "But maybe you don't know how to read. In that case, you'll have to wait until someone comes along who can help you." Before our lord could say anything, the man came by with a horse. He asked the blacksmith to shoe the horse. "Why don't you let me try?" said our lord. "All right, you can try," said the blacksmith. "You can't make so much of a mess of it, I won't be able to fix what you've done." And then our lord went out and took off the horse's legs. He placed the leg on the forge and made the shoe glowing hot. After he sharpened and rasped and bent the nail tips, he put the leg back on, as good as new, back onto the horse. When he was done, he took off the other foreleg and did exactly the same thing. After he put the leg back on, he took off the hind legs. First the right, then the left. He put them in the forge, made the shoes glowing hot. He sharpened and rasped, and he bent the nail tips. But he put the legs back on the horse. All the while, the blacksmith watched what he was doing. "You're not so bad a blacksmith after all," he said. "Think so," said our lord. A short time later, the blacksmith's mother came over to the smithy and told her son to come home for dinner. She was very old, her back was terribly stooped, her face was wrinkled, and she could hardly walk. "Pay attention to what you're about to see," said our lord. He picked up the old woman, placed her in the forge, and made her a lovely young maid. "I'll repeat what I've already said," the blacksmith. "You're not as bad a blacksmith after all. Above my door it says, 'Here lives the master of all masters.' Yet I honestly have to say that a person keeps learning as long as he lives." And with that he went over to the house to eat dinner. When he went back to the smithy, the man came riding up. He wanted to have his horse shoed. "I'll have that done in no time," said the blacksmith. "I've just learned a new method of shoeing horses. It's a good way to do it when the day is short." And he began to cut and crack until he had all the legs taken off the horse. "I don't know why I should bother working with only one shoe at a time," he said. Then he put the legs in the forge, just as he'd seen the Lord do. He filled it with heaps of charcoal and got the smithy's boy to help work the bellows hard. But things went as you might imagine. The legs burnt up, and the blacksmith had to pay the man for the horse. He wasn't very happy about that. Then a poor woman came walking past, and he thought, if the first method didn't work, the second one surely will. He picked up the old woman and put her in the forge. No matter how much she wept and pleaded for her life, it did no good. "You're so old that you don't know what's best for you," said the blacksmith. "In a moment you're going to become a young maiden again, and I won't be even ask a skilling in payment for my work." Yet it didn't go any better for the old woman, the poor thing, than it had gone for the legs horses. "That's a terrible thing to do," said our Lord. "Oh, I doubt there are many that will miss her," replied the blacksmith. "But shame on the devil. He's not doing a very good job in keeping his promise. He needs to remember what it says on the sign above the door." "If you could have 3 wishes for me," said our Lord, "what would you wish for?" "Try me," replied the blacksmith, "and then you'll find out." So our Lord granted him 3 wishes. "First and foremost, I wish that when I tell someone to go up to the pear tree next to the smithy wall, he will stay there until I tell him to come down," said the blacksmith. "My second wish is that when I tell someone to sit on the armchair inside the workshop, he will stay there until I tell him to stand up again. And finally, I wish that when I tell someone to crawl inside the steel wire pouch and have it in my pocket, he will stay inside until I give him permission to crawl out." "These are the wishes of a bad man," said St. Peter. "First and foremost, you should have wished for God's mercy and benevolence." "I didn't dare aim so high," said the blacksmith. With that, our Lord St. Peter said goodbye and went on their way. The days flew, and the years did too. When the time was up, the devil arrived to get the blacksmith, as they'd agreed in their pact. "Are you ready?" said the devil, sticking his nose in the smithy door. I just need to shape this nailhead first, replied the blacksmith. And meanwhile, won't you climb up the pear tree and get a pear to nibble on? You must both be thirsty and hungry after your journey. The devil thanked him for the excellent idea and climbed up the tree. Oh, now that I think of it, said the blacksmith, I won't be able to make the head from the nail for at least 4 years. The iron is awfully hard, and you can't come down from the tree during the time, so you can just sit up there and rest. The devil begged and pleaded for permission to come down. His voice was as pitiful as a 2-skilling coin, but it was no good. Finally, he had to promise that he wouldn't return until the 4 years were up. All right, then, you can come down, said the blacksmith. When the time was up, the devil came back to get the blacksmith. You must be ready by now, he said. Surely you have made the head for that nail. Oh, yes, I certainly have made a head for the nail, replied the blacksmith. But you're a little early just the same, and I haven't sharpened the point yet. I've never worked such a hard iron before. While I'm sharpening the nail, could you take a seat in the armchair and rest? I'm sure you must be tired. Thanks, I'll do that, said the devil, and he sat down in the armchair. But no sooner had he taken a seat than the blacksmith said, after he'd thought about it, he wouldn't be able to sharpen the point for another 4 years had passed. At first the devil begged nicely to be released from the chair, but then he grew angry and began to threaten. The blacksmith apologized as best he could, saying that the iron was to blame and it was awfully hard. He consoled the devil by saying that he was seated comfortably in the armchair. In 4 years' time, on the dot, he'd be able to get up. There was nothing to be done. The devil had to promise not to take the blacksmith away until 4 more years had passed. The smith said, All right, you can get up. The devil rushed off as fast as he could go. 4 years later, the devil came back to get the blacksmith. I know you must be ready by now, said the devil, sticking his nose in the smithy door. Ready and willing, replied the blacksmith. We can leave whenever you like. There's just one thing. I've been wondering for some very long time. I wanted to ask you if it's true what they say. The devil can make himself as small as he likes. Of course it's true, replied the devil. Well then, can you do me a favor and crawl into this steel wire pouch? You see if there's a hole in the bottom, said the blacksmith. I'm afraid I'll lose my travel money. Gladly, said the devil, and he made himself small and crawled inside the pouch. But no sooner was he inside than the blacksmith closed it up. Oh, there's not a single hole, said the blacksmith from inside the pouch. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, replied the blacksmith. But it's always better to be safe than sorry. I might weld its joints a little, just to be on the safe side. And he placed the pouch in the forge and made it glowing hot. Ow, ow, are you crazy? Don't you know I'm inside the pouch? Shouted the devil. Yes, but I can't help you, said the blacksmith. There's an old saying, you should strike while the iron's hot. When he picked up a big sledgehammer and set the pouch on the anvil and began pounding it with all his might. Ow, 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 shouted the devil from inside the pouch. Dear sir, let me out, and I will never come back again. With the blacksmith opened the pouch, the devil took off so fast without a glance back. After a while it occurred to the blacksmith that it might have been a mistake to make an enemy of the devil. If I don't get into heaven, he thought, there's a risk I'll end up homeless, for I've quarreled with one who's ruler of the hell. He decided it was best to get into hell, either heaven or hell, and better sooner than later. Then he'd know how things stood. So he hoisted the sledge with the hammer up onto his shoulder and set off. After he'd walked for a good while, he came across the crossroads where the road to heaven diverged from the one to hell. There he caught up with a tailor who was scurrying along, carrying an iron for pressing cloth. Good day, said the blacksmith. Where are you headed? To heaven, if I can get in, replied the tailor. How about you? Oh, we won't be keeping each other company very long, replied the blacksmith. I'm thinking of trying out hell first, seeing as I'm already acquainted with the devil. Then he said goodbye, and each went on a separate way. But the blacksmith was strong and a powerful man, and he walked much faster than the tailor, so it didn't take much time before he was standing at the gate to hell. He told the guard to announce him that he was there by saying that someone outside who wished to have a word with the devil. Go back and ask him who he is, the devil said to the guard. That's what he did. Give the devil my greetings and tell him it's a blacksmith from the pouch. I'm sure he'll remember me, replied the blacksmith. Ask him politely if he could slip outside hell for once, for I worked at smithy all day until noon, and after that I walked a long way. When the devil heard this, he ordered the guard to fasten up all 9 locks on the gate to hell, and put a padlock on too, said the devil. If that man gets inside, he'll wreak havoc in all of hell. Oh, I see there's no refuge to be found here, said the blacksmith to himself, when he saw the guard locking the gate more securely. I suppose I'll have to try heaven instead. With that, he turned on his heel and walked back the way he came until he came to the crossroads again. There he took the road the tailor had been taking. The blacksmith was angry about the long journey he'd made, for he'd gone to hell and back for no avail. So he strode along as fast as he could go and reached the gate of heaven just as St. Peter cracked it open a little to let the skinny tailor slip inside. At that moment, the blacksmith was still 6 or 7 paces from the gate. It's probably best that I hurry up, he thought. Then he grabbed the sledgehammer and threw it at the opening of the gate just as the tailor slipped inside. And if the blacksmith didn't manage to get through the gate, I don't know what has become of him. I know damn well I read that in the Grimm's Fairy Tales. So was the Irish one. I have to tag all 3 of those in a post sometime. I have to do all the highlight cuts, you know? Just have them played back to back. I love this as a note. For this children's tale, the infamous is everything, and the sounds of the rooster and the hen must be imitated. So, of course, I will. No one's in here catching Pokemon, so I guess it's good time. Okay. So, the rooster and the hen. You promised me shoes year after year, but I have no shoes. Shoes you'll have. I lay eggs and do my best, and yet here I am barefoot. So take your eggs and go into town and buy yourself shoes, and then you'll no longer be barefoot. Okay, well, that was brief. And it looks like my picture is starting to not respond anymore. Maybe. There we go. Okay. And here's another short one. The Rooster, the Cuckoo, and the Black Grouse. The Rooster, the Cuckoo, and the Black Grouse once bought a cow together. It wasn't possible to divide up the cow, and they couldn't decide how to reimburse each other. So they agreed that whoever woke up first in the morning should have the cow. The Rooster woke up first. "The cow is mine! The cow is mine!" said the Rooster. When the Rooster crowed, the Cuckoo woke up. "My cow! My cow!" said the Cuckoo. When he sang, the Black Grouse woke up. "Dear brothers of mine, share, as is right and fair, and as right as fair." "Tish, tish," said the Black Grouse. "Can you tell me who should get the cow?" Well, if they agreed whoever woke up first, it would have to be the Rooster, because the Rooster woke up when I was up. Still. Okay. Lillekort. Sure, I'll go with that. The next one is Lillekort. There once was a poor couple who lived in a miserable hovel marked by dreary poverty. They had neither food nor firewood. Yet even though they had almost nothing else, God had blessed them with children. Each year they had one more, and now they were expecting another. The husband was not very happy with this. He was constantly grumbling and griping. He said that he thought by now they'd had enough of God's gifts. When the time came for his wife to give birth, he went off to the forest to get firewood, for he didn't feel like hearing a new baby wail. He said there'd be enough time for that when the child started howling for food. After her husband left, the wife gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. The instant he entered the world, he looked around the room. "Oh, my dear mother," he said, "give me some old clothes that belong to my brothers and enough provisions for a couple of days. Then I'll go out to the world and try my luck. I see that you already have enough children." "Oh, my goodness gracious, my son," said his mother. "You're still much too little to do that." The boy refused to give up. He begged and pleaded for so long that his mother ended up giving him some old rags and a few provisions, wrapped in a bundle. Then, as happy and confident as could be, he set off into the world. Yet he was hardly gone before the woman gave birth to another boy. He too looked around and said, "Oh, dear mother, give me some old clothes that belong to my brothers and a couple of days' provisions. Then I'll go out into the world to find my twin brother. You already have enough children." "Good gracious me, you're much too little, you poor thing." And the woman said, "That will never do." But it did no good, and the boy begged and pleaded for so long that in the end he was given the old rags and bundle of provisions. Then looking ever so manly, he set off into the world to find his twin. After the younger brother had walked for a while, he caught sight of his brother up ahead. Then he called to him and told him to stop. "Wait for me," he said. "You're racing along the road as if someone were paying you to run. But you should have stayed to have a look at your younger brother before you set off into the world." Then the older boy stopped and looked back. The younger boy caught up with him and told him what had happened. There was no question that they were brothers. Then he said, "We had to hurry so much that we didn't have time to eat at home. Let's talk here." "What do you want to be called?" asked the older boy. "I want to be called Lillekort," replied his twin. "What about you? What do you want to be called?" "I want to be called King Lavering," replied the older boy. So they baptized each other and continued on. After they'd walked for a while, they came to a crossroads. There they agreed to part and go each their own way. And that's what they did. They got only a short distance when they ended up meeting again. Once more they went separate ways, but after a short time the same thing happened. They ended up meeting. Before they knew it, for a third time it happened again. Then they agreed that each of them would set off in a different direction, one to the east and one to the west. "If you are ever in need or suffer misfortune," said the older twin, "just call my name 3 times and I will come to help you. But don't summon me unless you're in dire need." "In that case, I suppose I won't be seeing each other anytime soon," said Lillekort. Then they said goodbye. Lillekort headed east, and King Lavering went west. After Lillekort had walked for a good long time, he came upon an old hunchback woman who only had one eye. Lillekort grabbed the eye from her. "Ow, ow!" cried the old woman. "What happened to my eye?" "What will you give me to give you back your eye back?" said Lillekort. I'll give you a special kind of sword that can conquer a whole army, no matter how big it might be, replied the woman. All right, hand it over, said Lillekort. The old woman gave him a sword, and then she got her eye back. Lillekort continued on. After he'd wandered for a while, he again came upon an old hunchback woman who only had one eye. And before she knew it, he'd stolen the eye. Ow, ow! What happened to my eye? Cried the old woman. What will you give me to get your eye back? Said Lillekort. I'll give you a ship that can sail both on fresh water and salt water, over mountains and through deep valleys, replied the woman. All right, hand it over, said Lillekort. The woman gave him a tiny little ship, small enough to fit in his pocket. Then the woman got her eye back, and they headed in opposite directions. After Lillekort had wandered a great distance, for the third time he came upon an old hunchback woman who only had one eye. Again he stole the eye. When the woman screamed and carried on, and asked what had happened to her eye, Lillekort said, What will you give me to get your eye back? I'll give you the skill to brew 100 barrels of malt ale in one batch, she replied. In return for that skill, the old woman got her eye back, and they headed off in opposite directions. After Lillekort had walked a short distance, he thought it might be worthwhile to try out the ship. So he took the ship from his pocket and stuck first one foot, then the other inside it. No sooner had he put one foot inside than the ship grew bigger. When he put the other foot inside, it grew as big as a seagoing vessel. Lillekort said, Now go on fresh water and salt water, over mountains and through deep valleys, and don't stop until you reach the king's palace. The ship set off at once, moving as fast as a bird through the air until it came to a spot just below the royal palace. There it stopped. Everyone inside the royal palace had been standing at the windows, and they saw Lillekort come sailing towards them. They were so amazed that they ran down to see what sort of person had come sailing on a ship through the air. While they were running down from the royal palace, Lillekort climbed out of his ship so he could stuff it back in his pocket. The moment he stepped out of the ship, it shrank back down into a little as the woman had given him. Folks from the royal palace saw nothing but a small, ragged boy standing on the shore. The king asked him where he was from. The boy said he didn't know, nor did he know where he had arrived. Then he begged sincerely and politely to work at the royal palace. He said if there was nothing else for him to do, he could carry firewood and water for the kitchen maid. And that is what he was allowed to do. When Lillekort came up through the royal palace, he saw that everything covered in black, both inside and out, both the roof and the walls. He asked the kitchen maid what this meant. Oh, let me tell you, replied the kitchen maid. A long time ago, the king's daughter was promised to 3 trolls, and the next Thursday evening one of them was supposed to come and get her. The Red Knight has vowed to rescue her, but God only knows whether he can. Now you can understand why there's great sorrow and distress here in the palace. When Thursday evening arrived, the Red Knight accompanied the princess down to the shore, for that was where she was supposed to meet the troll. The knight had vowed to stay there and protect the princess, but I don't think he was going to do much harm to the troll. No sooner had the princess set foot on the edge of the shore than the Red Knight climbed up a big tree standing nearby and hid as best he could among the branches. The princess wept and pleaded with him ever so earnestly not to leave her, but the Red Knight paid her no mind. It's better for one to be killed rather than 2, said the Red Knight. In the meantime, Lillekort begged the kitchen maid ever so politely to be allowed to go down to the shore for a while. Why do you want to go down there? Said the kitchen maid. There's nothing for you to do there. Oh yes, my dear mistress, please let me go. I dearly want to go down there and have a little fun with the other children. Oh, all right, go ahead, said the kitchen maid. But make sure you're back before supper cook-pot has been hung over the fire and the roast is to be put in the spit. Bring armload of firewood for the kitchen. Lillekort promised to do just that. Then he ran down to the shore. As soon as the boy reached the spot where the king's daughter was sitting, the troll appeared with a great rushing and roaring. He was so big and stout that he was a vile sight to behold, and he had 5 heads. "Scram!" bellowed the troll. "Scram yourself," said Lillekort. "Do you even know how to fence?" shouted the troll. "Even if I don't, I can learn," said Lillekort. Then the troll swung a big iron spar that was holding in his fist, made the sand on the ground fly up 10 feet in the air. "Drat," said Lillekort. "That was something, but now I'll show you what I can do." Then he grabbed the sword that the old hunchback woman gave him and swung it at the troll so that all 5 heads flew across the sand. When the princess saw that she'd been saved, she was so happy that she didn't know what to do. She jumped and she danced. "Lie down on my lap and sleep for a while," she said. She said to Lillekort. While he slept, she put him on a golden tunic. It didn't take long before the Red Knight climbed down from the tree where he saw there was no further danger. He threatened the princess for so long that she had to promise to say that he was the one who rescued her. Then he took his lungs and tongues from the troll, wrapped them in his handkerchief, and accompanied the princess back to the royal palace. The honors that had been bestowed upon the Red Knight were both nothing compared to what happened now. The king couldn't do enough for him, and the knight was always seated to the right of the king at the table. As for Lillekort, he went out to the troll ship and gathered up a great many gold and silver treasures. Then he scurried back to the royal palace. When the kitchen maid saw all the gold and silver, she was horrified. She said to him, "My dear Lillekort, where did all this come from?" She was afraid that he had not come by the treasures in an honest way. "Oh," replied Lillekort, "I went home for a while, and all these things had fallen out of some buckets, so I brought them back here for you. Yes, I did." When the kitchen maid heard the treasures were for her, she didn't ask any more questions. She thanked Lillekort, and after that everything was perfectly fine. On the next Thursday evening, the same thing happened. Everyone was sad and distressed, but the Red Knight said that if he could rescue the princess from one troll, he could certainly rescue her from another. Then he accompanied her down to the shore. Yet he wasn't going to do much harm to this troll either. When the time approached for the troll to arrive, the knight said just as he said the first time, "It'd be better for one to be killed rather than 2, and he climbed up the tree. Lillekort begged the cook for permission to go to the shore a while. "Why do you want to go down there?" said the cook. "Oh, please let me," said Lillekort. "I dearly want to go down there and have some fun with the other children." Again he was allowed to go, but first he had promised to be back before the roast was needed to be turned, and he had to bring back a big armload of firewood. No sooner did Lillekort reach the shore than the troll appeared with a great rushing and roaring. This troll was even bigger than the first one, and he had 10 heads. "Scram!" bellowed the troll. "Scram yourself," said Lillekort. "Do you even know how to fence?" shouted the troll. "Even if I don't, I can learn," said Lillekort. Then the troll swung his iron bar, this one even bigger, and sand flew up 20 feet in the air. "Drat," said Lillekort. "That was certainly something, but now I'll show you what I can do." Then he grabbed his sword and swung it at the troll, so that all 10 heads danced across the sand. Again the king's daughter said to Lillekort, "Lie down on my lap and sleep for a while." And while he slept, she put him on a silver tunic. As soon as the Red Knight saw there was no further danger, he climbed down from the tree, Again, he threatened the princess for so long that she had to promise not to say that he was the one who had rescued her. Then he took the tongues and lungs from the troll, wrapped them in his handkerchief, and accompanied the princess back to the palace. There was much joy and elation, as you might as well imagine, and the king couldn't do enough for the Red Knight. He was showered the man with honors and tributes. Lillekort gathered up the armload of gold and silver treasures from the troll ship. Yes, he did. When he got back to the royal palace, the kitchen maid clapped her hands, and she wanted to know where he'd found all the gold and silver. Lillekort replied that he'd gone home for a little while, and these were things that had fallen out of some buckets. He said he'd brought the treasures back for her. When the third Thursday arrived, things were exactly as they had been twice before. The whole palace was covered in black, and everyone was sad and distressed. But the Red Knight said he didn't think that they had much to fear. If he'd rescued the king's daughter from 2 trolls, he could certainly rescue her from a third. Then he accompanied her down to the shore. But when the time came for the troll to arrive, he once again climbed up to the tree to hide. The princess wept and pleaded with him to stay with her, but it did no good. The Red Knight repeated the same old thing. It's better for one to be killed than 2. That evening, Lillekort again begged to be allowed to go to the shore. Oh, why do you want to go down there? Replied the kitchen maid. He begged for so long that he was finally given permission to go, but he had to promise to be back in the kitchen before the roast needed to be turned. No sooner did he reach the beach than the troll appeared with a great rushing and roaring. This troll was much, much bigger than the first 2, and he had 15 heads. Scram! Bellowed the troll. Scram yourself, said Lillekort. Do you even know how to fence? Shouted the troll. Even if I don't, I can learn, said Lillekort. I'll teach you, shouted the troll, and he swung his iron bars so the sand flew up 30 feet in the air. Drat, said Lillekort. That was certainly something. But now I'll show you what I can do. He grabbed his sword at once and swung it at the troll so that all 15 heads danced across the sand. Then the princess was saved. She thanked and blessed Lillekort, for he was the one who had rescued her. Lie down on my lap and sleep for a while, she told Lillekort. While he slept, she put him in a brass tunic. Later the king's daughter said, But how will we make it known that you are the one who rescued me? Let me tell you how, replied Lillekort. When the Red Knight accompanies you back home, he will claim that he was the one who saved you. Then he will be given your hand in marriage and half the kingdom, as you well know. But on your wedding day, when they ask you who should fill the ale bowls, you must say, I would like the little boy who works in the kitchen to do it, the one who carries firewood and water for the kitchen maid. When I fill your bowl, I'll spill a drop of the knight's plates, but not on yours. And then he'll fly into a rage and hit me. He and I will do the same thing, twice. But the third time you'll say, Shame on you for striking the one dearest to my heart. He's the one who rescued me, and he's the one I will wed. Then Lillekort ran back to the royal palace, just as he'd done before. First he went to the troll ship and gathered up a great deal of gold, silver, and other precious treasures. Again he gave the kitchen maid a whole armload of gold and silver things. As soon as the Red Knight saw that, all anger was past, and he climbed down from the tree and threatened the king's daughter until she promised to say that he was the one who had rescued her. Then he accompanied her back to the royal palace. Now the knight received whatever honors he hadn't already received. All the king could think about was how to reward the man who had saved his daughter from 3 trolls. He said it was only right that the Red Knight should be given the princess and half the kingdom. On her wedding day, the princess said that she wanted the little boy who worked in the kitchen, the one who carried firewood and water for the kitchen maid, to fill the ale bowls at his bridal table. "Why would you want that dirty, ragged boy in here?" said the Red Knight. But the princess insisted that she wanted the boy to fill the bowls and no one else. Finally, she got her wish. Then everything happened just as Lillekort and the king's daughter had agreed. 3 times he spilled a drop on the Red Knight's plate, but none on hers. Each time the Red Knight grew angry and hit the boy. At the first blow, the ragged clothes Lillekort wore in the kitchen fell off. At the second blow, the brass tunic fell off. At the third, the silver tunic fell off. There he stood in a golden tunic so shiny and splendid that it practically gleamed. And then the king's daughter said, "Shame on you for striking the one who is dearest to my heart. He was the one who saved me, and he is the one I want." The Red Knight cursed and swore that he was the one who had rescued her. Then the king said, "Whoever saved my daughter must surely have some way to prove it." The Red Knight ran off at once to get his handkerchief with the lungs and tongues, while Lillekort went to get all the gold and silver and other precious things he'd taken from the troll ships, each of them placed before the king what they'd brought. "Whoever has such precious items made of gold, silver, and diamonds must be the one who killed the trolls," said the king. "It's impossible to obtain such things from anyone else." And so the Red Knight was thrown into the snake pit, and Lillekort was brought to have the princess and half the kingdom. On the day, the king and Lillekort went out to a walk. And Lillekort asked the king whether he'd ever heard of any other children. "Oh yes," said the king. "I had one other daughter, but the troll took her, and no one could save her. I've promised you my daughter, but if you can rescue my other daughter, who was taken by the troll, you can have her too, along with the other half of the kingdom." "I will certainly try," said Lillekort. "But I will need an iron chain that's 1,000 feet long, as well as 500 men and provisions that will last them 15 weeks. It will be a long sea voyage," he said. The king promised him all of these things, and said he was afraid that he didn't have a ship big enough to carry them. "I have my own ship," said Lillekort, and then he took out the pocket the tiny ship the old woman had given. The king laughed, thought this must be a joke. But the Lillekort merely asked him for the things he needed, and the king would see what it was. All that Lillekort asked for was brought to him. The first thing that was supposed to be loaded on board the ship was a chain, but nobody was able to lift it. There wasn't room for many men to stand in the tiny ship. Then Lillekort picked up the end of the chain and placed a few links on the ship. As he loaded more of the chain on board, the ship grew larger, until finally it was large enough that there was plenty of room for the chain and the 500 men and the provisions and Lillekort. "Now go on fresh water and salt water, over mountains and through deep valleys, and don't stop until you come to the place where you'll find the king's daughter," said Lillekort to the ship. The ship set off at once. There was a great whistling and whooshing all around it as it sailed over the land and sea. After a while, they had sailed far, far away, and the ship stopped in the middle of the ocean. "All right, we've arrived," said Lillekort. "It's another matter whether we'll be able to leave." Then he picked up the iron chain and wrapped one end around his waist. "I have to go down below. And when I tug hard on the chain, it means I want to come back up. Then you must all pull as one man, or else it will be the death of me and you both." With that, he jumped to the water, making a big splash of yellow spray. He sank and sank until finally he reached the bottom. There he saw a big mountain with a door. He opened the door and stepped inside. There he found the other princess. She was sewing, and when she saw Lillekort, she clasped her hands. "Oh, thank goodness," she cried. "I haven't seen a Christian man since I arrived here." "Well, I've come to get you," said Lillekort. "I don't think you'll ever manage that," said the king's daughter. "It won't do you any good for you to try. The troll will kill you if he sees you." "I'm glad you mentioned him," said Lillekort. "Where is he? It might be fun to see that troll." The king's daughter told him that the troll had gone out to find someone who could brew 100 barrels of malt ale in one batch. The troll was going to have a feast, and nothing less would do. "I can do that," said Lillekort. "If only the troll wasn't so quick-tempered that I'd have time to tell him that you can," replied the princess. "He's so hot-blooded that I'm afraid he'll tear you to pieces the instant he comes in. But I'll try and think of something. Go ahead in the alcove over there, and I'll see how it goes." That's what Lillekort did. No sooner had he crept into the alcove to hide than the troll came in. "Ugh, I smell the blood of a Christian man," said the troll. "Yes, a bird flew over the roof carrying a Christian man's leg in his beak. It dropped the leg down the chimney," replied the king's daughter. "I hurried to get rid of it, but it must be that what you smelled." "Yes, that must be it," said the troll. Then the princess asked him whether he had found someone who could brew 100 barrels of malt ale in one batch. "No, nobody can do that," said the troll. "A little while ago, someone came here and claimed he could," said the king's daughter. "How could you be so stupid?" replied the troll. "Why did you let him leave? You knew I was looking for someone who could do that." "Well, I didn't actually let him leave," said the princess. "But you're so quick-tempered that I hid him in the alcove. Seeing as you didn't find anyone else, he's probably still there." "Tell him to come in," said the troll. When Lillekort appeared, the troll asked him whether it was true that he could brew 100 barrels of malt ale in one batch. "Yes, I can," said Lillekort. "It's a good thing I found you," said the troll. "Go ahead and do it right now, but God have mercy on you if you don't brew the strong ale." "Oh, it'll be tasty," said Lillekort. With that, he started the brewing. "I'll need more trolls to carry the brewing liquid," said Lillekort. "The ones I've hired before weren't any good." Well, he got more trolls, a whole crowd, in fact. And then they were about to set the brewing. When the malt ale was ready, everyone had to taste it, of course. The first troll and the others, but Lillekort had brewed the ale so strong that after drinking it, they fell dead like flies. Finally, there was no one left except a wretched old woman lying behind the stove. "Oh, you poor thing," said Lillekort. "You should have a taste of the malt ale, too." He went over and scraped the bottom of the brew barrel that he wouldn't ladle, and then handed it over to her. At last he was rid of them all. As Lillekort stood there and looked around, he caught sight of a big chest, so he filled it with gold and silver. Then he tied the chain around the princess and the chest to himself. And he tugged the chain with all his might, and his men hoisted them up safe and sound. When Lillekort was back aboard the ship, he said, "Now go in salt water and fresh water, over mountains and through deep valleys, and don't stop until you come to the king's palace." The ship set off once, spraying yellow foam all around. When everyone on Throw Palace saw the ship, they hurried to greet with song and music, and they welcomed Lillekort with great joy. The happiest of all was the king, whose second daughter had been returned to him. Now Lillekort found himself in an awkward position, for both princes wanted to marry him. But he wanted only the first princess he had rescued. She was the younger of the two, and had spent a great deal of time pondering what he should do, as he didn't want to offend the other princess. One day he was thinking, and when it occurred to him that his only brother, King Lavering, was here, and they looked so much alike that no one could tell them apart. Then his twin could have had the other princess and half the kingdom. The half that Lillekort had already given was quite enough. No sooner had he thought of the idea than he went outside of the palace and shouted for King Lavering. No one came. And then he shouted again, a little louder, but no one came. Then Lillekort shouted a third time with all his might, and there stood his brother. "I told you not to summon me unless you are in dire need," he said to Lillekort. "Yet there's not a flea here that do you any harm." With that, he punched Lillekort so hard that he rolled across the meadow. "Well, shame on you for hitting me," said Lillekort. "First I won the king's daughter and half the kingdom, and after the other king's daughter and the other half of the kingdom, I was thinking of giving you one of the princesses and half the kingdom. So do you think it's reasonable to hit me?" When King Lavering heard this, he asked his brother to forgive him, and they were good friends again, and on the best of terms. "As you know," said Lillekort, "we look so much alike that no one can tell us apart. Switch clothes with me and go up to the palace. The princesses will think you're me. Whoever kisses you first will be the one that you shall have, and I shall take the other." King Lavering agreed at once. They switched clothes with his brother and went to the palace. When he came to the room where the princesses were sitting, he thought he was Lillekort. Both of them got up and rushed together towards him. The older princess, who was bigger and stronger, pushed her sister aside and threw her arms around King Lavering's neck and kissed him. So she was the one he won, while Lillekort won the younger of the king's daughters. Then, as you might imagine, they were married, and news of their wedding spread far and wide throughout 7 kingdoms. That was a fairly long story. Deathwalker coming? See any posts, but if you're there, enjoying the stories? So it's one of my reading nights, so I'm pretty much doing that, just reading stories. Honestly, Norwegian folktales are pretty interesting. There've been quite a few that I've found that match up with the Grimm fairy tales and some of the Irish folktales that I've read too. So it's pretty interesting reading. this next one is. No, it's only 2-pager. The Doll in the Grass. There once was a king who had 12 sons. When they were grown, he told each of them to go out into the world and find himself a wife. She had to be able to spin and weave and sew a shirt in one day, or else the king would refuse to have her as a daughter-in-law. He gave each of the sons a horse and new armor, and then they set off into the world to look for wives. After they'd ridden some distance along the way, the brothers said they didn't want Ashled to go with them, for he was a worthless boy. Well, there was nothing to be done about it. Ashled had to stay behind, and he had no idea what to do or where to turn. He felt so sad that he got off his horse and sat down on the grass to weep. After he'd sat there for a while, one of the tussocks in the grass began to move, and out of it emerged a tiny white creature. When it came closer, Ashled saw it was a delicate little maiden. She was so very, very tiny, she came over to him and asked whether he'd like to come and see the doll in the grass. Oh yes, he would like that very much, and that's what he did. When he got down into the grass, he found the doll lying in the chair. She was lovely and very beautifully dressed. She asked Ashled where he was headed and what the purpose of his journey. He told her that he was one of 12 brothers. Their father, the king, had given each of them a horse and armor and told them to set off in the world to find a wife. But she had to be able to spin and weave and sew a shirt in one day. If you can do that, and you want to be my wife, then I won't journey any further, said Ashled to the doll in the grass. Oh yes, I would gladly do that. She hurried to spin and weave and sew a new shirt. It turned out to be very, very tiny, but also very short. This was a shirt that Ashled took home with him. When he arrived, he was embarrassed because the shirt was too small. Yet the king said he could take the girl as his wife. Ashled was both happy and pleased. He went back to get his little sweetheart. When he reached the doll in the grass, he wanted her to ride on the horse with him. But that's not what she wanted. She said she would ride in a silver spoon, and she had 2 little white horses of her own who could pull the spoon. Then they set off. Ashled rode on the horse, and the doll in the grass rode on the silver spoon. Both of the horses pulling the spoon were tiny white mice. Ashled kept to one side of the road. He was afraid his horse might tread on her sweetheart, for she was so very tiny. After they had traveled for a while, they came to a big lake. There Ashled's horse took fright, veered over to the other side of the road, and tipped over the spoon. The doll in the grass fell into the water. Ashled was terribly dismayed, for he didn't know he was going to get her out. But a few minutes later, a merman brought her to the surface. She was now just as big as any other grown person, and even lovelier than she was before. Ashled put her on the horse in front of him and rode home. When Ashled arrived, his brothers had also returned. Each of them had brought a sweetheart, but they were all quite ugly and vile. They were so mean that they'd been fighting with their betrothed all the way home. They wore hats made of mashed tar and soot, which had run down their faces, making them even uglier and more vile. When the brothers caught sight of Ashled's sweetheart, they were all jealous of him, but the king was so overjoyed by those 2 that he had chased the others away. Then Ashled celebrated his wedding to the doll in the grass, and afterward they lived happily together for a very long time. And if they're not dead yet, then they're still living happily today. No, I was glad she'd be happy about that story. I'll have to make sure he sees it. Okay. I think I'm just going to read 2 more stories. It's kind of... Well, it's not really that late, but I'm a little tired. You know, side effect of reading bedtime stories. Okay. Well, I still have to highlight and post them separately, so... Anyway. Paal Next-Door. There was a woman who had a deaf husband. He was kindly and simple, and that's why she was more fond of the neighbor. They called that fellow Paal Next-Door. The deaf husband's servant boy was well aware that something was going on between these two. One day he said to the woman, "Mistress, would you dare wager $10 that I can get you to confess to something that would bring you shame?" "Yes, I certainly would," she said. So they wagered $10. One day, when the servant boy and the deaf husband were in the barn doing the threshing, the boy noticed that Paal Next-Door had come over to see the woman. The servant boy didn't say a word, but a good while before the mid-morning break, he turned to face the barn door and suddenly shouted, "All right, then." "Oh, is it time for us to go in?" said the man. He hadn't noticed a thing. "Yes, I suppose we should. The mistress is calling us," replied the servant boy. As they reached the porch of the house, the boy began coughing and clearing his throat so that the woman would have time to hide Paal Next-Door. When they stepped inside, a big bowl of porridge was made from sour cream and stood on the table. Oh, wife," said the husband. "Are we having porridge and cream today?" Yes, we are," said the woman. She was hopping mad. After her husband and the servant had eaten and left, she said to Paal, "That boy is a sly one. This is all his fault. But you'd better go now. I'll meet you at the bottom of the meadow around noon." The boy was standing on the porch and heard what she said. "Master," he said, "I think it's best we go to the valley to repair the rail fencing that the wind blew down. The pigs from next door have been rooting around in our meadow." "All right, let's do that," said the husband, for he did everything anyone told him to do so. Before noon, the woman came tottering down the meadow, lugging something under her apron. "Oh, wife, you're certainly not yourself today," said the husband. "Are we having a noon meal, too?" "Oh, yes, this is for you," she said, even angrier than before. They ate their fill of Leska and butter and took swigs from the liquor flask. "We'll take some over to Paal Next-Door, mistress," said the servant boy. "He probably hasn't had a noon meal today." "You do that," said the woman, and her good humor was instantly restored. On his way to there, the boy got out the Lesky and dropped a crumb now and then as he walked. Paal Next-Door he said, "You better watch out. The old man has noticed that you keep coming over to see his wife. He's not happy about that. He swore that he'll swing his axe at you the minute he sees you." Paal was both frightened and dismayed. The servant boy went back to his master and said, "There's something wrong with Paal's plow. He wants to know if you could bring over your axe and have a look at the plow." So the husband picked up his axe and went over there. No sooner did Paal Next-Door catch sight of him than he took off running as fast as he could. The husband twisted and turned the plow and looked for it every way he could. Then he couldn't find anything wrong. He headed back home. Along the way, he picked up the less crumbs the boy had dropped. His wife watched him doing this for a while. She wondered why her husband was picking up from the ground. "Oh, Master's probably picking up stones," said the boy. "I notice that Paal Next-Door keeps coming over here, and the old man just isn't pleased about that. Now he has sworn that he will stone the mistress to death." And the wife took off running as fast as she could go. With that, "What is the mistress chasing after so fast?" asked the husband when he came back. "Oh, I think the house is on fire," said the servant boy. Then the husband set out after her. As she ran, the wife screamed, "Oh, don't kill me, don't kill me! I've never let Paal Next-Door come visit me again." "Those $10 are mine now," said the boy. Okay. Let's see, this next one's 9-page, so I'll go ahead and end up this one tonight. This is Soria, Moria Castle. Fun to say. Soria, Moria Castle. There once was a couple who had a son named Halvor. From the time he was a little boy, he refused to do anything but sit and poke at the ashes. His parents kept sending him off to learn a trade, but Halvor refused to settle in anywhere. As soon as he'd been gone for a few days, he'd run away from his apprenticeship and hurry back home. Then he would sit down at the hearth and dig in the ashes again. One day a ship's captain came and asked Halvor whether he'd like to go on sea with him and visit foreign lands. "Oh yes," Halvor said. He'd like to do that. It wouldn't take him long to get ready. I have no idea how many days they sailed, but eventually a big storm blew in. When it was over and the calm was restored, they didn't know where they were. They had been driven ashore on the foreign coast, and no one on board recognized it. There was no wind, so the ship was becalmed right there. Halvor asked the captain for permission to go ashore and have a look around. He said he'd rather be walking than lying in his bunk. "Do you really think you should appear before anyone looking like that?" asked the captain. "The only clothes you have on are rags you're wearing." But Halvor insisted. Finally he was granted permission, though he would have to come back soon as the wind began to blow. He went ashore and he found a lovely land. Everywhere he went he found vast plains with fields and meadows, but he couldn't see a single person. When the wind began blowing, Halvor didn't think he'd seen enough. He wanted to go a little further just to see if he could find some folks. After a while he came to a big road that was so flat you can roll an egg along it. Halvor followed the road, and as dusk fell, he saw off in the distance a big castle, all aglow. He had been walking all day, and he brought hardly any provisions, so he was terribly hungry. Yet the closer he came to the castle, the more frightened he felt. Inside the castle, a fire was blazing in the hearth. Halvor went into the kitchen, which looked quite splendid. He'd never seen such a splendid kitchen before. There were wooden basins filled with both gold and silver, but not a soul in sight. After Halvor had stood there for a while and no one came in, he went over to the door and opened it. Inside sat a princess at a spinning wheel. Oh my!" she cried. "Why would a Christian boy dare come here? It's probably best if you leave at once, or else a troll will swallow you whole. A troll with 3 heads lives here." "I don't care if he has 4 heads. I'd like to see this fellow," said the boy. "I'm not leaving. I haven't done anything wrong. But you must give me something to eat, for I'm terribly hungry." After Halvor had eaten his fill, the princess told him to try swinging the sword that hung on the wall. But he couldn't swing it. In fact, he couldn't budge it at all. Well, said the princess, take a swig from that flask hanging next to it. That's what the troll does whenever he's going out and needs to use his sword. Halvor took a swig. With that, he could swing the sword as if it weighed nothing. Let the troll come whenever he likes, he thought. All of a sudden, the troll came rushing home. Halvor hid behind the door. Ugh, I smell the blood of a Christian man, said the troll as he poked his head in the door. Yes, you're right about that, said Halvor, and chopped off all his heads. The princess was so happy to be saved that she danced and sang. Then she happened to think about her sisters, and she said, If only my sisters could be saved too. Where are they? Asked Halvor. Then she told him. One had been taken by a troll in the castle that was 40 miles away, and the other had been taken to a castle that was 60 miles beyond that one. But first, she said, you have to help me get this carcass out of here. Well, Halvor was strong. He dragged the troll's body and the heads away. Then he quickly made the whole place neat and clean. He slept soundly, and the next morning he set off at dawn. He was restless, so he walked and ran all day. When he caught sight of the castle, he grew frightened again. It was much more splendid than the first one, but there wasn't a soul to be seen. Halvor went into the kitchen, but didn't stop there. He headed straight for the next room. Oh, why does a Christian boy dare come here? Cried the princess. I don't know how long I've been here, but in all that time I haven't seen a single Christian. It's probably best that you leave at once, for a troll with 6 heads lives here. No, I won't go, said Halvor, even if he has 12 heads. He'll swallow you alive, said the princess. But it did no good, and Halvor refused to leave. He wasn't afraid of the troll, but he wanted food and drink, because he was very hungry after traveling so far. The princess gave him as much to eat as he liked. Then again she told him to leave. No, said Halvor, I'm not leaving, for I've done nothing wrong, and I have nothing to fear. The troll won't care about that, said the princess. He'll kill you whether it's very right or not. But if you refuse to leave, try to swing the sword over there that the troll uses in battle. Halvor couldn't swing the sword. Then the princess told him to take a swig from the flask laying next to it. When Halvor did that, he could swing the sword. All of a sudden, the troll appeared. He was so big and stout that he had to turn sideways to get in the door. When the troll stuck his first head into the room, he bellowed, I smell the blood of a Christian man. Halvor instantly chopped off one of the troll's heads, then all the rest of them. The princess was overjoyed, but she happened to think of her other sister, and she wished that she too could be saved. Halvor thought it should be possible. He wanted to leave at once. But first he had to help the princess remove the heads and body of the troll. The next morning he set off. It was a long way to the castle, and Halvor had to keep walking and running in order to get there in plenty of time. Toward evening he caught sight of the castle. It was much more splendid than the other two. This time he was hardly frightened at all. He went straight to the kitchen and then to the next room. There sat a princess more beautiful than anyone he'd ever seen. She said the same thing her sisters. No Christian had ever time she'd been there before. And she told him to leave or else the troll would try to swallow him alive. She said the troll had 9 heads. Even if he had twice or 3 times as many heads, I'd refuse to leave, said Halvor. He went over to stand next to the stove. The princess begged him earnestly to leave, or else the troll would eat him whole. But Halvor said, let him come if he wants. Then she gave him the troll's sword and told him to take a swig from the flask, so he'd be able to swing it. All of a sudden, the troll came rushing home. This one was even bigger and stouter than the others. He too had to turn sideways to get to the door. I smell The blood of a Christian man, he said. Halvor instantly chopped off one of the troll's heads, and then the rest. The last head was the toughest of them all. Halvor had to work harder than he'd ever worked before to chop it off, even though he was sure he had enough strength to do so. Now the other princess joined their sister at the castle, and they were happier than they'd ever been before. They were very fond of Halvor, and he was fond of them. They said he could have any of the princesses he wanted, but of the three, the youngest was the most fond of him. Yet, Halvor went around acting quite strange. He was both sullen and silent. The youngest princess asked him why he was longing for, and whether he was unhappy about staying with them. Oh, he was happy enough, he told her, for they certainly had plenty to live on, and he was content to stay. But he felt such a longing for home. His parents were still alive, and he dearly wanted to see them again. The princesses thought this might be easily arranged. You will be able to go back there, and back without suffering any harm for as long as you follow our advice, they told him. Oh yes, he would do anything they said. Then they dressed him in such finery that he looked like a splendid king's son, and they put a ring on his finger. With this ring, he could wish himself there and back, but they told him he mustn't throw the ring away or mention their names, or else that would put an end to his good fortune. Then he would never see them again. I wish I was home, and home was here, said Halvor, and it just happened as he wished. Before he knew it, he found himself standing outside his parents' house. Darkness had fallen, and his parents were quite astonished when they saw such a splendid and elegant stranger come in. They began to bow and curtsy. Halvor asked them whether he might stay the night. No, they told him. That was not impossible. We're not prepared for that, they said. For we have nothing that would please such a fine gentleman such as you. It would be best if you went up to the manor house. It's not far. You can see the chimney from here, and they have plenty of everything. Halvor wasn't pleased by this. He wanted nothing more than to stay, but his parents insisted that he go to the manor house instead. There he would find both food and drink, and while they didn't have a chair for him to sit on. No, said Halvor, I won't go there until the morning. Let me stay here tonight. I can sit by the hearth. Well, they couldn't refuse his request, so Halvor sat down by the hearth and began poking at the ashes, just as he used to do when he was idling away the hours at home. His parents discussed all manner of topics and told Halvor about one thing and another. Then he asked them whether or not they had any children. Oh yes, they had a son named Halvor. They didn't know where he'd gone, nor did they know whether he was still alive or dead. Maybe I'm your son, said Halvor. Oh, I doubt that, said the old woman as she stood up. Halvor was so lazy and idle that he never did a thing. He was always filthy, and that lice practically knocked each other out when they swarmed all over him. He could never become such a fine gentleman as such as you, sir. A little later, the woman went over to the hearth to poke at the embers. The light from the fire shone in Halvor's face, just as it used to when he was home and digging through the ashes. Then she recognized him. But it is you, Halvor, she cried. His old parents were happy beyond all measure. He had to tell them everything that happened to him. The old woman was so happy to see her son that she wanted to take him up once to the manor house and show him to the girls. They had always been scornful of him. She led the way and Halvor followed. When the woman reached the manor house, she said that Halvor had come back home, and they would soon see what a splendid gentleman he was. He looked like a prince, she said. Oh, we doubt that, said the girls, tossing their heads. We bet he's still the same lousy creature he always was. At that moment, Halvor came in, and the girls were so astonished that they forgot all about the dresses they were mending at the hearth. They fled the room wearing only their shifts. Nice. When they came back, they were terribly shamefaced and hardly dared look at Halvor. They always treated him with such arrogance and scorn. All of you have always claimed to be so grand and beautiful that you have. No, you said no one could be your equal. But you should see the oldest princess that I rescued, said Halvor. Compared to her, you're nothing but a bunch of goat herders. The middle princess is even more beautiful, but the youngest, who is my sweetheart, is more beautiful than the sun and the moon. If only they were here so I could show you them, said Howard. No sooner had he said those words than all three princesses stood right there. Then he grew dismayed, for he remembered now what they'd told him. At the manor house a feast was arranged for the princesses, and a great fuss was made over them, but they refused to stay. We want to visit your parents, they told Halvor, and then we want to go out and have a look around. He went with the princesses. They came to a big lake house in the manor house. Close to the lake they saw a beautiful green hill. That's where the princesses wanted to sit down and rest, for they thought it would be more lovely to sit there and gaze at the water. They sat down, and after they had been there for a while, the youngest princess said, I suppose I should have to pick lice off of you, Halvor. So Halvor lay down with his head on her lap, and she picked the lice from his hair. It wasn't long before he fell asleep. She took the ring off of his finger and put another in its place. Said to her sisters, Hold my hand as I hold yours. I wish we were at Moria Castle. When Halvor awoke, he saw that he'd lost the princesses. He began to weep and carry on, and was terribly downhearted. But no one could console him. No matter how much his parents pleaded, he refused to stay. He said his goodbyes, and he told them that he would probably never see them again. If he couldn't find the princesses, he didn't think life would be worth living. He had $300 left. He put the money in his pocket and set off. After he'd walked for a while, he met a man with a decent-looking horse. Halvor wanted to buy the horse, so he began haggling with the man. Well, I hadn't really thought about selling it, said the man, but perhaps we could reach an agreement. Halvor asked the man how much he wanted for the horse. I didn't give much for her. It's a good horse to ride, but it's not much good for carrying anything else. Though I'm sure you can handle your provisions in a sack. And if you can get off and walk now and then, said the man. Finally, they agreed on a price, and Halvor put his sack on the horse's back and walked for a while and rode for a while. In the evening, he came to a green embankment. A big tree stood over there, and he sat down next to it. After a while, he took a sack of provisions from the horse and let the animal roam free, and then he lay down to sleep. When the next day dawned, Halvor set off at once, for he was filled with restlessness. He took turns walking and riding all day through the big forest. There were many dazzling green clearings among the trees. He didn't know where he was, nor did he know where he landed. Yet he allowed himself no time to rest, except when he gave the little horse to eat. He ate from his own sack of provisions, and when he came to one of the green clearings, he rode and walked, and he thought there was no end to the forest. After dark the next day, he saw light shining through the trees. It was someone awake. I can warm up and have something to eat, thought Halvor. A short time later, he came to a miserable little hut, and through the window he saw two people sitting inside. They were very old, and their hair was gray as a dove. The woman's nose was so long that while she was using to poke at the embers, she sat at the hearth. Good evening, said the old woman. What brings you here? There have been no Christians in these parts for more than 100 years. Halvor told her that he was headed for Moria Castle, and he asked her whether she knew how to get there. No, I don't, said the old woman. But the moon is about to arrive, so I'll ask him. I'm sure he knows. He must have been able to see the castle, for he shines on everything. When the moon appeared bright and shiny above the treetops, the old woman went outside. Hey, moon, she called. Can you tell me how to get to Moria Castle? No, I can't, said the moon. When I was shining in that direction, the cloud blocked my view. Wait a little while, the woman said to Halvor. The west wind is about to arrive. I'm sure he knows, because he gusts and blows into every nook and cranny. Oh, did you bring a horse with you? He said when they went back outside. Let the poor creature loose in that paddock. Don't make us stand there starving. Would you like to trade your horse to me? She said. I have a pair of old boots, and when you put them on, you can cover 9 leagues with every step. I'll trade you the boots for the horse, then you'll get to Moria Castle much faster. Halvor was more than willing to do so. The old woman was so happy with her horse that she was practically dancing. Now I too can ride to church, she said. Halvor was feeling restless and wanted to leave at once, but the old woman told him that there was no hurry. Why don't you lie down and sleep on the bench, for we have no bed to give you, said the old woman. I'll keep watch for the west wind. All of a sudden, the west wind arrived, roaring so loud that the walls creaked, and the woman went outside. Hey, west wind! Hey, west wind! Can you tell me how to get to Moria Castle? Someone is here who's headed that way. Oh, yes, I know it well, said the west wind. I'm about to go there to dry some clothes for the wedding that's going to take place. If he's quick, he can come with me. Halvor came outside. You'll have to hurry if you want to come along, said the west wind. Then he headed off. They traveled a great distance over moors and bridges, and mountains and shores. It was all Halvor could do to keep up. Well, I don't have time to stay with you any longer, said the west wind. I have to go and tear down part of a spruce forest before I get to the bleaching grounds to dry the wedding clothes. So just keep going along that ridge. You'll come upon some maids who are doing washing. From there, it's not far from Moria Castle. A while later, Halvor came upon the maids who were doing the washing. They asked him whether he'd seen any sign of the west wind, who was supposed to come and dry the clothes for the wedding. Oh yes, said Halvor. He's going to break down parts of the trees in the spruce forest, but he won't be long before he's here. Then he asked the maids how to get to Moria Castle. They pointed him in the right direction. When he arrived at the castle, it was practically swarming with folks and horses. But Halvor was so ragged and tattered from traveling due to the west wind through bushes and thickets that he didn't want to step forward. He decided to wait until late the day, then everyone would be down to eat. As was custom, the guests were about to drink, toast to the bride who was leaving her girlhood behind. Then, filling the glasses, poured some ale for everyone, and the bride and groom, the knights and pages, and all at last he came to Halvor. Halvor joined in the toast, then he dropped his glass in his glass the ring the princess had put down his finger when he laid the lap in the lake. He asked the servant to give his greetings to the bride and hand her the glass. The princess stood up from the table at once. Who has best earned the right to marry one of us, she said. Is it the one who rescued us, or the one who sits here as my bridegroom? Everyone agreed there could only be one answer for that. When Halvor heard this, he didn't hesitate to tear off his rags and put his clothes on as a prince. Well, he's the one, cried the youngest princess. And when they caught sight of him, then they shoved the other bridegroom aside and celebrated her wedding to Halvor. Oh, God. Troll voice is killing me. I really cannot do that troll voice for very long. Especially going troll voice to princess. and says, I smell the blood of a Christian man. Damn, I need some tea. Let's see that. How long has been? It's an hour 47. Oh, that's not bad. Let's see whether it's the raid, shall we? Oh. Let's see. Man, Secret's got 223 people. Shit. And Bow's got 3.1k. Yumi's got 119. Prism's got 118. Lisa has 58. Ravikami's got 16. Oh, all these people playing games. No, what's Chess doing? I'm curious. Let's start doing a commercial. Sell commercials. Wait. Just to start. Tempkins not do anything. He's offline. Tiefen's not on. Yeah, he just killing the stream. Not seeing anyone on the raid that do any good. I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and end it. Start editing. So yeah. I guess thanks Dusky for popping in. I don't know how long or if and when you were in here. So yeah. See all you cubs tomorrow night, I guess. If I see you. So yeah. Good night. Be good.